Well, a lot has happened in the time since we heard in the sanctuary the reading in our season of Lent about Adam and Eve in the garden hiding. But maybe you know the story. Adam and Eve have been told that they have a lot of freedom, but for their own welfare, there are things they should avoid. And like most of us, when we hear the word no, we immediately try to find the loopholes or a way to get away with it. And so they tried the fruit that they were not supposed to. And now they have learned, right? They have acquired the knowledge of good and evil. They know now things that they don't know what to do with. And they know that they have done something wrong. They have done something that puts a barrier between them and God. And so they hide in the garden that God made. Who, if God is a gardener at all like human gardeners, tends to know all the nooks and crannies. And there's this whole omnipotence and omniscience thing. So God knows where they are, and yet the instinct is to hide, right? Maybe you do that. I know I do that. When something is daunting and looming, whether it's something I'm guilty about or just something I'm anxious about, I want to get small. As a child, my favorite place to read was in my closet. I figured out that I could move my reading lamp and sort of clamp it on what was probably supposed to be a shoe shelf, and I was narrow enough that I could still fit in there, leaned against a pillow with the lamp and the doors closed, and oh, I was fine in my little safe hole. I loved it. And if I had Well, my office is a little larger version of that in the house now. It's a glorified closet. We want to get safe. Even if it's just an illusion, Adam and Eve hide from God in the garden. They don't know exactly what is going to happen, but they're afraid. And now the disciples here in our reading, it's Easter night. This is all within the same day as the story we heard last week as Mary meets Jesus in the garden and is sent as an apostle, a messenger to the disciples to tell the good news. They have now some information they didn't have before. The tomb is empty. Mary thinks she's seen Jesus. They're still reeling from him being crucified. They have fled when he was crucified because they were terrified. And usually if the Romans want to put down a rebellion, they find everybody and they just, line them up and crucify them. So Jesus' followers are hiding in the house with the doors locked on the night when maybe something good has happened, but they're not sure and they can't make sense of it. There are confusion, amazement. There's probably some hope trying to bubble up amidst all the other things, but they're terrified and they're hiding. And maybe you remember playing hide and seek. Kids, I bet you play hide and seek sometimes, and sometimes adults remember how to have fun and play these kind of games too. And I had fun with hide and seek. I hid the Easter eggs last week, and I hid them so well that we don't know what happened to it. Good thing they were outside. But when you're the one who's hiding, you know that feeling when you hope you found a good spot and you want to be really, really quiet and you don't want to give anything away and your heart is pounding so loud because they're walking nearby and you're afraid they're going to find you and they grab you and they do. Oh, you've been found. And in hide and seek, when you've been found, you lose, don't you? You win if they don't find you. And then when you get found, that means you're out of luck. When Adam and Eve are found in the garden, the truth comes out, right? Yes, this is what we did. Things change. God says, oh boy, you're not going to be able to live like this. I'm going to have to give you clothes and put you in the world that you understand and are a part of in a different way now. when you get found, you don't win necessarily if you're playing hide and seek. So there are the disciples. They're in their closed room. And here comes Jesus. The jig is up. Maybe you notice, if you've got your bulletin, you can even scroll back, or your Bible in front of you. Jesus came among them and said, "Peace be with you." And we don't get a reaction from the disciples. Then he shows them his hands and his side, and then they rejoice. But when he first shows up, can you imagine what they felt? Maybe happy and excited that he was alive, but remember, they just ran away in his moment of deepest need. He was dying, and they said, "I don't know him." Right? They came to arrest him, and they all ran. And so Jesus arrives, and there's got to be this pit in their stomach, along with some hope, but some sense of accountability. It's better that Jesus found them than that the Romans did, I suppose. But I don't know what they were feeling. But Jesus must have, because the first words out of his mouth are peace. Peace be with you. He knows what they need. Peace be with you. He shows them what they need to see, to remember that Jesus is God who is with us, not God who is against us. And then he says, "Go and forgive. As the Father sent me, I send you. Go and forgive," implying that there is no reconciliation that needs to happen any further between them and Jesus. He is there as God's forgiveness in the flesh and is sending them out to forgive. It turns out that they weren't playing hide and seek after all. I think they were playing sardines. Maybe you know that game. Sardines is a little bit like hide and seek in that someone goes and hides and everybody seeks. And when you find that person, they're not caught, you hide with them. And then the next person is looking, and if they find the two of you, then they cram in and hide with you. That's why it's called sardines, because a good hiding place for one person doesn't turn out to be great for 4 or 5. But when you are found, you don't lose. When you are found, someone joins you. And I think that's a fun way to think about Jesus, isn't it? That we are playing sardines whenever we hide in our closets, whenever we are have no choice but to stay in our homes to take care of our health and the health of our communities and our world. Whenever we are in the corner of the garden, hoping that God will forget about us entirely because we're not very proud of ourselves, wherever we are hiding, Jesus comes. And he doesn't grab us and say, "Gotcha." He scooches in with us and says, "Peace be with you." Boy, that's good news. That's good news I need. I hope that it is good news for you as well, because Jesus with us is good news in the flesh. But there's one other thing that we should probably remember, and that is that he doesn't just snuggle up and stay put, right? Jesus says, "Go and forgive." Now, Jesus is not saying go leave your houses and go knocking on doors and breathe on people. Did you notice that in the reading? Jesus comes into the room and breathes on them in the midst of these stay-at-home orders that makes us all go, oh, Jesus, 6 feet. But wherever we're at, we are called to this sort of forgiving. As the Father has sent me, so I send you. If you forgive, there is forgiveness. If you don't forgive, how will people know Jesus? Right? If you hang on to people's sins, if you hold on to grudges, they're not going to recognize Jesus. They're not going to see him in their midst. So Jesus comes and packs in with us and then gives us the Spirit so that we are able to do what we are called to do. And of course, this is usually called Doubting Thomas Sunday because Thomas is usually the star of the gospel. And it's absolutely true that he is a perfect model of faith for us because Thomas wants what Mary had. All the disciples want what Mary had. She saw Jesus. So Jesus came to them. Well, Thomas missed out. And Jesus, let me try that again. Thomas missed out, and Thomas doesn't bite his tongue. Thomas has questions and frustrations and a need that has not been met, and he's hungry for the presence of the Jesus that he loves, and he says it. Not just to God in the quiet corner of his prayer, but even to his brothers there gathered and his sisters, to the folks who are confident or hopeful, he is comfortable sharing his struggle. That is how we live as community, right? We're not supposed to be the place where everyone's got it figured out. We're the place where you can share your struggles and I can share mine, and we can hold one another in those times, trusting that Jesus will be with us. He doesn't run away from the community. They don't kick him out. Thomas is right there the next week, where apparently all the rest of the disciples have got it a little more settled, and Thomas has none of that. He's still gathering with them. And so I hope that's an encouragement to you in your times of struggle, to still gather, to still lean on brothers and sisters in the faith, to ask what their questions and struggles are, because they have them. Questions and doubt and uncertainty is not the opposite of faith. They leave Thomas open to an encounter with Christ. It's a part of the journey. Folks who have heard me in Bible studies and even children's time and confirmation have heard me say that, and I stole this from a wonderful professor, David Lowe's, that relationships involve back and forth, right? If you tell me that you love, well, my daughter tells me that she loves meringue. She made a beautiful lemon meringue pie this week. Ooh. I say, oh, meringue? Really? What is it about meringue that you like? Stranger says they like meringue. I say, okay, well, I don't know what's wrong with you, but I don't try to question it. But when you have a question, or obviously about something more substantial with someone you love, you're willing to say, you've hurt me. Can we talk? I don't understand why you always do this. Can you help me? I'm sorry that I'm letting you down because I'm not getting this right. You're willing to engage. And that's faith. It's a relationship. It's a living, dynamic thing, not a, okay, smile and nod. If that's what God wanted, Jesus wouldn't have come to be among us. And Jesus comes and, he showed the disciples, and that was all right. But Thomas needed something a little different. And so Jesus says, okay, go ahead. Poke me where it hurts. I guess I've always envisioned these as being scars when Thomas gets to touch Jesus. But it doesn't say scars. It says wounds. It's only been 3 days. He's alive again. But if this is a real human body, who knows? I think it's interesting to think about Jesus saying, go ahead. I know it's going to hurt, but this is what you need. Jesus comes to find us wherever we are. Thanks be to God.